Hi. In this video, I'm going to show you an example of how to use a linear equation to solve a problem. So here's an example of a problem. We know that the water level in a bathtub, and so we're going to call that W for water level, and that's going to be in centimeters. T seconds after the plug is pulled is given by the equation W equals negative 1/6T plus 20. Okay, so we made a quick little sketch of that over here. I'm only going to use the positive values on both axes. So this will be T and this will be W. Because we only have information when the time is positive and the water level's got to be positive too. So it starts up at 20 and then it's going down. It's got a negative slope. So it goes down there, presumably until it's empty. Okay. So the first question is, what's the water level after 30 seconds? So if we want to use the equation to solve this, we know it's going to be less than 20 centimeters because the water's going down. We have to think about, well, what does this 30 tell us? In this case, what it is, that's the time. So the time is 30. And once we decide that, it's pretty easy to do the rest of it. We'll just substitute 30 in for T. So we have the W equals negative 1/6 times 30. And then plus 20. So I just copied that equation down, but I replaced my T with 30. Okay, and then we'll just simplify here. So negative 1/6 times 30, that's negative 1/6 of 30, so it's negative 5 plus 20. We've got W equals 15. So what that tells us is the water level is 15 centimeters after 30 seconds. So the water level will be 15 centimeters after 30 seconds. Okay, so the next one. When will the tub be empty? This is almost the same thing, except the trickiest part of this question is that there's no numbers in the question. And there sort of is a number, but it's a little bit hidden away. It's not, because if you look, there's no numbers. But what this really is telling us is that another way of wording this is to say, when will the water level be 0? The tub is empty when there's no water left in it. So what this is really saying is, when will W be 0? And once you realize that, the next step is much more obvious what we do with that. So what we do is we just replace our W with a 0. So we'll have 0 equals negative 1/6 T plus 20. And now we just have to solve that linear equation. So to get rid of the 20 first, we'll subtract 20 from both sides. So that's what I did there. And then we'll simplify. We get negative 20 equals negative 1/6 T, and plus 20 minus 20 is 0. And now we want to get rid of this negative 1/6 here. So we could divide by negative 1/6, or it's actually the same thing, we can multiply by negative 6. So let's multiply both sides by negative 6. And the reason that this works is that negative 6 times negative 1/6 is 1. So here we've got T, and here we've got 120. So just before I discuss that, I just want to make one point here. When we multiply by negative 6 on one side, we usually want to write that in brackets. To show that we're multiplying and because it's a negative number. But one thing we had to add here, we had the negative 6. We had to add brackets around the negative 20 to show that we're multiplying these two numbers and that we're not doing negative 6 take away 20. Okay, so back to this answer here. We've got T equals 120, so that's the time in seconds after the plug is pulled. And what we were figuring out here was, when was the tub going to be empty? So what this tells us is the tub will be empty after 120 seconds. And then I think it would be a nice touch here, because normally if you're talking about 120 seconds, you don't call it 120 seconds. Normally we call that 2 minutes. So let's add that in the answer. Alright, so a common thing that we want to do if we're trying to solve a problem with an equation, the most common thing that we'll want to do is substitute a value for one of the variables and then solve for the other variable. So sometimes it'll be reasonably obvious, like after 30 seconds we can say, oh, that's the time, that's 30. Sometimes it'll be a little bit in disguise. If we want to know when it will be empty, well, that means when will the water level be 0. And the most common time for the value of the variable to be disguised is when it's 0. So if it looks like you don't have a value of a variable, you might not, but just stop and check, is one of them 0 maybe? So once you find the value of the variable that you know, substitute that in, and then simplify until you get the value of the other variable. Then consider what your answer means and answer in a sentence. Okay, good luck.